right, Mayor, you want to kick us off?
Sure do. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and welcome to this presentation, Downtown Greenfield.
Recording in progress.
Many thanks to Peg and company for that, and for all of the people, too numerous, but they are, many of them are on page 2 of the report. So thank you all for participating. And I'm going to shut up now so that we can get on with the presentation.
All right. Well, I will hop in. This is MJ Adams. I'm Director of Community and Economic Development for the City of Greenfield. And we're here tonight to hear a presentation on the final recommendations that have come out of a planning process that was started earlier this spring when the City of Greenfield was awarded consultancy services under the Local Rapid Recovery Program from the Department of Housing and Community Development. So to set the stage for what we're up to tonight, you should know that even before COVID struck, the City of Greenfield was taking a good hard look at what was going on in our downtown and started to lay the groundwork to really do an update of our downtown revitalization plan, which was last formulated in, I think 2003 was our last downtown revitalization plan update. Many of you know that we did a master plan update in 2014 called Sustainable Greenfield, and had the good sense to also create a working committee whose job it was to implement, to make sure that the master plan update didn't sit on a shelf, but was a living document that would be leaned into and lived into. And I think the Sustainable Greenfield Implementation Committee members have been very diligent in keeping that document alive and the activities that the community wanted to see happen moving. Doing that, they said, you know, there's a lot of things that are happening in our downtown area. We need to get a more focused look at that. So we really did start thinking about doing an update of the downtown revitalization plan. And some of you might recall that in January 2020, we held a community forum that was called A Deliberate Downtown, where we actually put it out there to see what people wanted to see happening in the downtown. Shortly after that, the COVID pandemic came to town and clearly started to wreak havoc with a lot of things that were going on in our community. We all managed through it. We continue to manage through it. But this initiative that came aboard this year, the Local Rapid Recovery Program that is funding this particular piece of work, is really in response to the COVID pandemic and what it has done to our downtown. So tonight we are here to hear the recommendations, to go through the recommendations that the consultant has developed. I'll share with you that they came into town in April, met with an ad hoc committee that the mayor had appointed, met with a number of stakeholders in the downtown, met with folks from the Sustainable Greenfield Implementation Committee, and really tried to get their fingers on the pulse of what was going on in our downtown and things that we could do to really pull ourselves out of this COVID impacted economy, and it's with a special focus on the downtown and to breathe life back into the community, the downtown community that we know and love. So the game plan tonight is we're going to hear, this is a presentation evening. We'll be listening to the consultants' presentations on the recommendations. After that, there will be some brief updates I'll give you on some of the activities that are in the works. And then I'll be outlining more in depth the process of where we go with these recommendations, including looking for feedback from the community in the month of September, conversations with City Council during the month of September, a public forum in September, and then making decisions about which of these recommendations we want to advance and how we might prioritize finding funding or making decisions about how to advance the different recommendations that we're going to hear tonight. At the end of all of this, we will have an opportunity for questions and answers. We'll open it up and we're going to ask people to use the chat room to ask their question. This will really be focused on the recommendations and projects that are presented. As I said, the process for implementing and moving forward and advancing the recommendations. We're not there yet because we still need more community input, but wanted everyone to have the same presentation before we started having those discussions. So with that, I'd like to thank Peg and Ted. This is the last time we will be seeing our consultants, as far as I know, in this context. and they've been working with us diligently. Peg has a bit of a long history with the city of Greenfield. She's worked on several other projects. Ted came to town in the spring and worked on some aspects of this project, and we'll take a look at, they did a presentation back in May, which was their initial findings. And out of those and some additional work, they're coming to us with the recommendations, and we'll do the final presentation. But Peg and Ted, thank you so much for the hard work and attention you've given to Greenfield over the past couple of months.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks, MJ and Mayor. I want to just, let's see, get a hold of my screen here. MJ, you did a great job at laying out what we're going to cover tonight. For me, it's really been a pleasure to work with MJ and the Mayor over the last 6 months on this project, and with my colleague Ted Brovitz from Brovitz Community Planning and Design, and Tudi Tapa, who's our Community Economic Development Analyst at Fine Point. And as MJ mentioned, my name's Peg Behringer. I'm a partner at Fine Point Associates. And just to follow up on what the mayor was saying, we certainly want to thank everyone that contributed their insights and input throughout the whole process and participated in the walkabout tours and the community meetings and the business survey and everything else. And we tried to represent as many people as we could on that page. But if we missed anybody, we're sorry about that. But we want to thank you too, because this has been a really terrific process. I'm going to provide just a little bit of an overview before we dive into the recommendations. As you know, we started in March really with a diagnostic phase, and then we went into an ideation phase and then into a final planning phase, which is where we are now. And the result of this is a set of data-driven recommended actions or projects with details that make them actionable and information that could be included in the funding applications. That was really the point of the way we did the recommendations. And, you know, as we have mentioned before, downtown Greenfield was hit pretty hard by COVID-19. Sales have been down, and foot traffic between remote working and residents turning to online purchasing. There's been a lot less people in the downtown. Reopening for some of the businesses is still yet undetermined. And we know that 72% of the businesses experienced a revenue loss, and 66% of the businesses said that even in 2021, their on-site customer counts were still down compared to pre-COVID levels. But the good news is that the entrepreneurial energy and the community spirit remain really high in Greenfield. You know, a couple of new businesses have opened up in downtown. We've seen a lot of creative new outdoor dining spaces that have emerged. 6 great new bee statues landed in downtown thanks to the Crossroads Cultural District and its partners and the city. They managed to get them designed by local artists and installed. And a really large number of business owners and residents and community leaders came together to work on the RRP plan. We had a number of different avenues for community engagement, and the little graphic in the bottom right-hand corner, that was a product, that word cloud was a product of our last community forum when we asked people what values would they like the downtown to really represent. The diagnostic phase was really instrumental in analyzing existing conditions and determining appropriate strategies. These are the key findings, and we're not going to go through them, but they're detailed in the full report. And then we came up with our recommendations for actions and projects, working with all of those people you saw listed on that page and more. This is what came forward as the recommended actions. You know, the recommendations for new social gathering spaces and the implementation of a marketing initiative and physical improvements are all aimed at bringing customers back to downtown. The recommendations for a new storefront improvement program will make many more businesses eligible for the storefront improvement program and for assistance, and will promote high quality storefront treatments, while the new sign bylaw revisions will facilitate signage improvements. The recommendation for the RFP process for the First National Bank and the suggested strategy to promote residential development will encourage a new mix of uses and increase vitality. And we're going to spend a little time talking about each of these recommendations tonight. And we've categorized them in 5 categories. We're going to start with private realm, and I'm going to turn it over to Ted at this point to start us off with our first private realm recommendation.
Thanks, Peg. So the first recommended project is to create a storefront improvement program with more flexibility than the existing program to have a wider impact. And as Kate mentioned before, as Peg mentioned before, there is a storefront improvement program in place and has been for a number of years, and it has had a positive effect on revitalizing facades and storefronts in the downtown area. But as we went through the diagnostic analysis, we determined that 74% of the business owners in the downtown area are renters and not owners. So it's difficult for them to access the funds. And there's other requirements, such as a 15-year lien on the improvements that are made to a facade. And it's hard for businesses to basically lock in for that amount of time. As you know, businesses in downtown, they tend to roll over here and there, and so it's hard for them to take advantage of this program. So what we want to do with this first program is to really understand, the impact it's had on the projects that have gone forward. Are there changes? Are there case studies that we can learn from other cities and towns that have had successful and more flexible programs? And how can we get the businesses themselves and the storefronts to be participants more to a higher degree in the storefront improvement program? So that's really what we're trying to achieve under this recommended project. Next slide. So there's a lot of good examples of storefront improvement programs out there. This is an example from Cambridge. And Cambridge is kind of interesting because they have very small projects, from window signs to major facade renovations. And the amount of funding for each project is varies significantly as well. But they've had a lot of projects throughout the city, and it's really made a difference, particularly for small businesses that really are just trying to get a foothold and sort of make their dreams come true. It's been successful. There's other examples like in Norwood, downtown Norwood, which has a really successful storefront improvement programs, very flexible. Other places like Somerville and so on. There's a lot of good examples out there that we can learn from and emulate as we make revisions to our program. Next slide. The next recommended project is what we call the 100% Corner Demonstration Project. And basically, what we're trying to do is make a real good impression on people that are coming to downtown Greenfield that may have been there for the first time, and they're just trying to make a welcoming entrance. So the 100% corner is basically your main intersection in town, and in this case, it's Main Street and Federal Street, Bank Row and Court Square. And what we're trying to do is make it more vibrant and lively. Basically, on the north side of the intersection, you've got two bank buildings. You can see the TD Bank building and the gallery next door to it, which are interesting buildings, but they're really not grabbing your attention if you're coming to town for the first time. On the other side, you've got Hawks and Reed and the coffee house, two old industrial buildings that are attractive, but again, they're not going to grab your attention if you're coming to town and trying to find out what's here in downtown Greenfield. So what we want to do with this project is work together with property and business owners to see if there's things that we can do in terms of changes to the facades, enhancements that could make it a more sort of active, vibrant intersection, and really make a good first impression on people that are new to the city. Next slide. So just showing some examples. Here's on the left is the Hawks and Reed, one of the major downtown anchors that you really wouldn't know unless you knew it and you had been there before. If you're new to the community, it just wouldn't make much of an impression on you. So if you do things like having a sign which identifies all the music that's happening this week, maybe some sort of banners, as well as streetscape improvement. It's really a combination of things that can be done on the building as well as things that can be done on the sidewalk to really enliven this major intersection. As far as the streetscape improvements, could be things like curb extensions with outdoor seating and public art, more street trees. If you've been over to Turner's Falls and Avenue A, what they've been doing with some of their intersections is really attractive. And they really sort of make a good impression on first timers in Greenfield. Next slide. Just another example, how you could sort of make that building more attractive. The TD Bank, adding a beautiful mural on it, adding some street trees, maybe some vertical banners, things that sort of soften the look of it and make it more interested and inviting. Next slide.
So we're going to move on to a new category for revenue and sales. And we're going to move on to our first one, is the implementing of the wayfinding system.
Okay. So this recommended project, it's really sort of building off some work that has been done in the recent history. Back in 2015, the town or the city got some money from the state to put together some basic wayfinding ideas and elements. And you can see that in the upper left-hand corner with the graphic of the tower and the sort of the different types of wayfinding elements that you could add to it. So really what we're talking about here is taking the next step and refining that into a real wayfinding program where we identify the types of signs that we want, the locations of signs, both leading into downtown and then in downtown itself, maybe some entrance treatments. So for example, Councilor Elmer and Hazard identified the overpass there on the south end of Bank Row as a possible spot for some sort of entrance art, public art, similar to what they've done in Northampton. So we wanted to sort of take this to the next step, identify the types of signs, get some specifications for the types of signs, and move forward and get these wayfinding elements in place, making it easier for people that are not familiar with Greenfield and maybe tourists coming up and down 91 or Route 2 to take notice and be drawn in. Next slide. Just an example from Portsmouth, New Hampshire. They got a really nice wayfinding system starting outside the city and moving into. So basically, they do a good job of transitioning you from driving into town and then getting out of your car and being a pedestrian in the downtown area and along the waterfront with a series of signs that direct you to points of interest, such as the Prescott Park or the waterfront, as well as information about local businesses. They have business directories as part of their wayfinding system. So it's been very successful. Here's another example, and similar to Greenfield, Situate about 5 years ago did a basic sort of a rudimentary wayfinding plan with a nice graphic, actually sort of a slogan, "See Situate," and they took it from there and identified the specific locations, the specific information they wanted to provide on the signs, the types of signs, and they got the specifications, and now they're in the process of implementing it. So they've done a good job of getting the pieces in place leading into the Harbor Village District, which is their downtown. Now they're working on the final part of it, which is the business directory signs. And speaking of business directory signs and community kiosks, that's another recommended project, is that, again, once you're led into downtown, you're in downtown, and you're getting out of your car, whether you're on street or whether you're in the parking garage or one of the side street surface lots, we wanted to then transition you to give you information about what's here in town. And that includes identifying the different businesses, restaurants and shops and so on, but also identifying the different points of interest, public parks, venues for different civic activities, historic buildings, and that sort of thing. So this project would basically, again, step forward with the basic wayfinding program that was identified 5 years ago, and work with the business community to identify all the different businesses that are in town, put that on a map, keep it up to date every year, and identify where we would want to put these community information kiosks obviously in a central location where it's easy for people to pick it up and to look at what's happening in Greenfield. Next. So just some examples. Upper left-hand corner is Saratoga Springs, New York, which has a wonderful wayfinding system. At the point of getting out of your car and walking down the street, they have these information signs which show not only the whole downtown area and the points of interest, public points of interest, but also the individual businesses that are on that block. So you see these every couple of blocks going up and down their main drag. And they're very attractive and very effective. On the right, you've got the Hyannis Main Street Business Improvement District maps that are placed in the parking lots leading into the downtown area, as well as on Main Street itself. There's a good one in Newburyport in terms of business directory and a map. Some interesting wayfinding and attractive community elements in Bennington, where they've got historic buildings that are identified in terms of what their past history was. They've got a community clock, and they've got a really nice kiosk. Next.
So the next one we want to talk about that falls under the revenue and sales category is the marketing initiative. And what we're trying to do at the marketing initiative is get people to come back to downtown and the Crossroads Cultural District and keep them coming back. This would be a way of reversing the trends that the businesses have experienced over the last couple of years. We want to try to get people back into the habit of coming downtown. They've established new patterns. Because of COVID, we want to establish new routines, which includes downtown. And that means attracting people from the surrounding area, but also tourists, and doing that by presenting downtown as a destination. And we see this as really a three-prong approach. And the first one is improving the Visit Greenfield website with more dynamic content and links to drive traffic and search engine optimization. And I looked at the Greenfield website just yesterday, and it looks like some of those improvements have already taken place. A welcome back to downtown campaign, so some type of dedicated social media campaign that people like to see people. So show them people eating and socializing and shopping in downtown. There's lots to promote. There's a lot of new reasons to come to downtown. So make them aware of what's new and what's happening and the safety measures in place. And the third prong is a pledge to support local program. And this would be something that would incentivize people to patronize downtown businesses over a 2-month period, get them reacquainted with businesses and discover new ones. And the purpose for this is pretty obvious. It's like buy local or buy local, right? This is an example from Amherst, and their downtown put together a Take the Pledge program. And over 2 months, they got people to pledge to patronize 10 downtown restaurants, 5 retail stores, and 3 services. They used pledge cards that were online and also in paper, and they had people send them back, and they had prizes, and it was really a really successful program. In fact, they were so successful that they are thinking about repeating it with a little bit different twist. This is an example of a website I just wanted to share with you because I think it's a pretty good one. And this is a downtown that has a cultural district, so that's similar to Greenfield, Natick Center. And they have a very visual and nice website. And the other thing I just wanted to show an example of is they use videos. And that was one of our recommendations for the Visit Greenfield website, is to include more video content. And this has got a lot of little nice videos on their website. And here are just a couple of social media postings, of things that are happening in downtown and welcoming people back to downtown. The next category we want to talk about is tenant mix. And the first one, the recommendation that we want to talk about is about the First National Bank. And I think everybody's familiar with the First National Bank. It's a really key property. It's been vacant over 40 years. It's very closely located to the 100% corner that Ted was talking about just a few minutes ago. It does have a preservation restriction that will last in perpetuity. And there's been previous concepts and studies over the years, but we really haven't hit that magic formula that seems to make a feasible project. So it seems like it might be time to try to get some private sector development interest. So our recommendation is to use a request for proposal process to solicit developer interest in reusing the bank building for a use that would bring people into downtown. And I think what's going to require providing a lot of information, making it easy for the developer to envision an opportunity. So it's a little bit of a marketing effort, to make this work. I think if we could get a use for downtown that would bring people there on a regular basis, we'd have more people, which equals more customers. And it would also address this iconic structure that otherwise might continue to deteriorate. And the steps involved here would, of course, involve developing the RFP, but I just wanted to make the point that we're not talking about like a 10-page document full of black and white text. I think it'd be really important that it's very graphic, that it illustrates a community vision, a lot of photography, and also some technical things that a developer would be interested in, like a 3D laser scan of the building, a structural analysis, some other supplemental information, the goals and the evaluation criteria. And then marketing the RFP would also take a little bit more effort, developing a great email list with social media campaign, advertising, and orchestrating a developer's tour that would showcase the property and the community. This is an example of New Bedford's developer tour. They put together information of several of their projects, and then they organized a couple-hour tour that brought people into the community. They talked to political leaders, they talked to businesses, they did a walking tour, and they ended up at Moby Dick Brewery. Just a little example of some of the information that they provided. In Chicopee, they put together a marketing booklet with real estate cut sheets about the projects that they were interested in really putting forward for developer interest. And they organized this so that it would be in time to be marketed at one of their largest downtown events. They call it the Lights on Arts and Culture. And so they organized this so that they could market the downtown properties at the same time that that event was going on. The next recommendation under tenant mix is the exploring the use of the UCH TIF program to support and encourage residential development in upper floors. And we just think this might be a tool that you'd want to evaluate. It's a redevelopment incentive. It allows the city to provide a property tax exemption of some size that is determined by the city. And it's for residential development. The EDIP program is for commercial development. But it might be a tool that would be usable in downtown for projects like perhaps the Wilson's department store. So this is one of several underutilized properties in downtown. And we know it would be great to have a commercial anchor at this use, an expanded commercial anchor or a new commercial anchor at this location. Bring customers in that might also patronize other establishments. However, this building has got several floors, and the idea that you could possibly put residential on some of those floors might make a commercial anchor on the lower couple of floors more feasible. So if that were the case, this might be a good tool to consider. So what we would be suggesting is just taking a harder look at this tool, drafting the objectives that the city would like to accomplish, reviewing it with the city departments, maybe doing some exploratory meetings with property owners and prospective developers. And then if it seems like it's appropriate, then take some additional actions. Of course, this is going to require political and community support, one or more interested property owners or developers, and a portion of the housing units must meet affordability standards. But the idea of mixed use and residential development in downtown could be a viable use. It provides market support for businesses. And it also can provide a more vibrant and safer downtown with more eyes on the street. Lowell is one of those communities that's used the TIF program for a long time for mixed use. And here's a couple of their projects, one more recently in the middle, and then the one on the right is from quite a while ago. Framingham has got 2 new projects that they use the UCH TIF program for that are mixed use development for their downtown. And now we're going to move into admin capacity. And what we want to talk about here just a bit is that during our diagnostic phase, one of the things that came out was we were really struck by what great organizations and energy and volunteers were committed to doing all kinds of things in downtown. But it did seem like there was not a single organization that had a really defendable funding source and that was able to really manage and coordinate downtown improvements and ongoing programs. And many other downtowns the size of Greenfield have a staffed management entity, like a Main Street organization or a business improvement district or downtown association that could coordinate marketing efforts and events and physical improvements and business assistance. So we thought that one of the tools that might be feasible to look at would be a parking benefit district, because this would allow parking revenue to be allocated to support improvements and staffing. And what a PBD, as they call them, it's a designated geographic area where some or all of the parking revenue is allocated for a dedicated fund. And then it can be used for parking operations or improvements or for services that's provided by a downtown organization or a cultural district. And we would suggest starting with a parking study that had utilization data and recommendations, which often results in ways to increase revenue. And it can also result in ways to drive parking traffic to the parking garage and leave parking meters more available. And then after you did that, you define your area and your management entity and your improvement program if it seemed like this was a tool that would be worthwhile. And I've just got a couple of examples here, and that's been done in many communities in Massachusetts, but this one is Arlington Center Parking Benefit District, and they've used their funding for a wide range of physical improvements. One of the most recent things they did is they bought these large planters to beautify some of the outdoor dining areas that have been created. Rockport takes 12% of their meter revenue, and they use it for services provided by the cultural district director, which coordinates events and does marketing and a number of other things. And Brookline Village Parking Benefit District is a large district. They rearranged their parking plan and changed their parking pricing strategy when they created their parking benefit district. And now that district manages the parking and traffic operations. They also use the funds for accessibility improvements, and they use the funds for public art. And I'm going to turn this back over to Ted to talk about the sign bylaw revisions.
Thanks, Peg. So we want to take a look at the sign regulations. Currently, it's a pretty generic bylaw. It basically allows one sign. It's based on the size of the building. And basically, for successful, vibrant downtown businesses, they typically have, a couple, 2, 3 high quality signs. That could be, a wall sign that people on the sidewalk or people in their cars can see, as you see with Rise Above in the upper right-hand corner there. Projecting signs, which are really aimed at people walking up and down the streets, like the People's Pint. Sandwich board signs like Greenfield Games. And window signs. I mean, basically the combination of these different signs really add vibrancy to a downtown district. And it's important that the sign regulations reflect that. So basically what we want to do is take a look and make sure that all of the different types of signs you might see in a typical traditional downtown are allowed, and that there are standards for each of those, but that if you have good quality standards in place, the process of review should be straightforward. Rather than having to go to the zoning board if you want more than one sign, have clear standards, good design standards for each type of sign, and have an overall amount of square footage you can have for all the signs, so that it can be done, in quality, it can be high quality, but also can be done efficiently with an efficient review process. Next slide. So a lot of good examples of recently adopted sign regulations. This one's in Somerville, where there are very detailed sign design standards. There's a variety of different signs. In this case, we're looking at wall signs, blade signs, awning signs, canopy signs. So there's an overall limit based on the size of your building, but also there are standards for individual types of signs. And you can have a combination, any combination you like, as long as it's under the overall amount of square footage you're allowed. And there's also differences between a downtown setting and a car-oriented commercial setting, so that the smaller scale would be in the downtown area versus an area where you have a lot of parking in front and there's building setbacks, that you would have bigger signs. So that's really what we want to do in Greenfield, is make it more specific to our downtown walking district. Next slide. Northampton is actually in the process of adopting what they call public realm signs. So they got pretty good sign standards already in place, but what they're doing is they're adding to that some specific standards in terms of where they can be placed on the public sidewalk. So things like sandwich board signs can be in what they're calling the frontage zone, which is the area right adjacent to the storefronts, but also it can be out in the furniture zone. All you have to do is make sure you keep that throughway area for pedestrians clear. But you can do outdoor seating, you can do projecting signs, you can do sandwich board signs in the frontage zone, and then you can do sandwich board signs and seating in the furnishing zone.
And we're moving on to our last category for public realm.
So this is moving forward with the idea of the Court Square Plaza, and you probably all know that this was a demonstration project or a conceptual plan that was put together a few years ago with a state grant. And what we really want to do is move forward as a demonstration pilot program, looking at how successful we can be in terms of putting together a vibrant plaza where you can program different music and different civic events, and how that relates to that intersection, the 100% intersection, and sort of making a positive impact on people that are coming into town, but also how it might change pedestrian patterns, how it might work with the more formal open space there where the monument is, how it relates to Town Hall and the Hawks and Reed building, and even to Veterans Park, which could be connected through a walkway between the Hawks and Reed and the Town Hall. So really want to sort of get a sort of an idea of how successful it might be if we were to allocate that space for pedestrian use and for civic activity. And lots of good examples. I like the one in downtown Norwood on the left. Basically, they were doing a very similar project there's a small street between their town common and the Norwood Theater, secondary street, that they decided they wanted to make a sort of a pedestrian plaza out of. And for the last year and a half, it's been in that use. They basically spent less than $5,000 for synthetic turf, picnic tables, umbrellas, and some of their basic fixtures. And it's become a very vibrant and attractive space. So they're thinking about making this a permanent plaza, but they really needed some time to really test it out and see how well the community would accept it, and it's been very well accepted. On the right is Durian Way, which is a pedestrian plaza in downtown Springfield. It's highly programmed. The downtown business improvement district has the farmers market there, and there's lots of different activities, including music and different markets and that sort of thing. And it's a really sort of lively space. Next. And there's Pulaski Plaza in downtown Norwood, Northampton, which again, it's a wide open space. It's got movable chairs and tables. It's very visible. Lots of good lighting in there, and it's the stage for a lot of community activities. And it's one of their real special places in downtown Northampton. The next project, a recommended project, is to complete the Fisk Avenue Pocket Park. And basically, this is the area next to the Fisk Avenue alley where Mesa Verde is located, as well as Wild Roots. Currently, it's a small public parking lot, and the idea is that we want to convert it into some public open space, make it sort of a pocket park. but also working directly with the property owners and business owners along the alleyway so that they can really activate this what would become a new civic space. So basically, it's going to be a coordinated effort between the property owners and the city. We're going to relocate some of the parking onto Miles Street and create a nice sort of open or shaded area that could be extended off into the alley, Fisk Alley, and then get more activity there. I know there's a lot right now with the seating and some music with the Mesa Verde, but even try to build off that a little bit more and make it really active so that they sort of really complement each other over time. Next. So just looking at the property, there is a conceptual plan that was put together a few years ago with the Conway School that needs to be refined. For example, what they have is head-in parking on Miles Street, but there's a lot of potential space for on-street parking, parallel parking up and down Miles Street. So there may be an opportunity to capture more of that surface lot and put that into public park by putting more parking on the street itself. Next slide. An example is Pliny Park up in downtown Brattleboro. This is at the 100% corner. It was bought by a downtown organization, Building a Better Brattleboro, which raised money for it and created this beautiful little park, which used to be a parking lot owned by Dunkin' Donuts in downtown. And it's adjacent to a couple of restaurants. It's a very active space for demonstrations. People sit in there all the time and eat their lunch. It's beloved by the community. It's only been there for maybe 10 or 15 years, but it's really a really important part of downtown Brattleboro. Next slide. This is the Beechtree Alley in Hyannis, Massachusetts. It is a fantastic spot. It's private alley. It's a narrow alley. It's maybe 12 or 15 feet wide. And there are multiple buildings that spill off onto it, including 2 restaurants. And they've done a lot of programming here. They have a lot of outdoor dining. They have a bar in the back. There's displays, merchandise displays. And the downtown, the Main Street Business Improvement District does a lot of programming there. So in the lower right corner, you can see that they have the long table celebration every year. They have the Taste of Hyannis. So there's always something happening on this west end of Main Street. And it's a very, very interesting place with a really limited amount of space. This is a park that was built by Fitchburg Savings Bank next to City Hall in Fitchburg. Basically, the town acquired the property through tax title. It had an old abandoned building on it, and it was torn down by Fitchburg's Savings Bank, and they created this beautiful little park and created a lot of activity in it. They have lots of music in there. They have a vendor court. They have food carts. And it's really, sort of a nice place for people at lunchtime to walk down the street and sit and have a sandwich and listen to music. And it's become, even though it's owned by the bank, it's really become a sort of a publicly oriented private space, or POPs, as we call them. So it's really, it functions like a public park, but it's owned privately. Next slide. And then this recommended project is to add additional streetscape elements up and down Main Street in coordination with the Main Street Roadway Improvement Program, which is in the design process right now. So basically this would be complementary to the Main Street improvements and looking basically from the curb to the storefronts, including the storefronts, in terms of what can be done to enhance the pedestrian environment along Main Street. That could include things such as handicap access improvements, curb extensions and crosswalks, new street trees where we've got gaps, such as at the 100% corner, new sidewalk materials, replace some of the brick with maybe some different types of pavers, more pedestrian level lighting, banners, bike racks, corals, and public art. And so basically we want to look at those segments of downtown sidewalks, block by block, to determine what else could be done to really enhance the pedestrian environment. Next. So again, looking back at Northampton, they're adopting what they call public realm design standards. So basically, they're looking at every part of the sidewalk, from even extending over the sidewalk into the parking area where they might have parklets. So they have design standards for parklets. They may eventually put in a bike track in there, but they have different types of parklets. It could be a bike corral, it could be an exercise station, it could be a extension of a restaurant. They've got all these different standards that are putting together to really activate that space where it's appropriate. And looking back towards the buildings, they've got standards now for outdoor displays, projecting signs, outdoor seating, and other sort of spill outs from these storefronts. So they've looked at every part of the sidewalk to determine, what the particular uses are, having design standards from everything from projecting signs and sandwich board signs to the types of furnishings they want and the types of street trees that typically do well in that urban environment. Next. Just building off that. So.
And we thought we would just talk a little bit about some of the funding sources that might be available for some of these projects. And we have provided this information, in greater detail, and some new information is probably going to come out from DHED through the RRP program. The ARPA funds, there's federal ARPA funds, and then there's state ARPA funds. I think there's about, Greenfield has received, I believe, around $5 million of federal ARPA allocation. The state ARPA funds there's $4.5 billion that the legislator has not yet determined how they're going to use. So they're having a series of working task force and a community process to figure that out. Some new funding sources have been created, and some of them are listed on this list. And they're likely to have another round starting in January. Some of these funding sources had a round last January 2021. Several of them will have another round January 2022. Some of the traditional sources that have always been using for downtown projects they apply to RRP projects. And we expect that there's going to likely be some additional funding sources and priorities for the RRP projects announced in the coming weeks. I think DHED is working on that and trying to get RRP projects prioritized in a number of different funding programs. So there's information in the final report, just some suggestions, but I think also it's a stay tuned situation because I think we're going to have more information about funding sources coming up. And what we want to do now is turn it over to MJ to talk a little bit about some updates and the process for advancing the recommendations. MJ, you're muted.
Of course. Ted and Peg, thank you so much for so much information. And I want to share with everyone who's interested that the report that they have written is up on the Community and Economic Development website. If you can't sleep at night and want to read through the details, please avail yourselves to it online, and you can be a quick study on it. But as we were working through this, inevitably, when you're in a situation like this, you can't just sit on your hands and wait until you've done all your planning to try to advance some things into happening now. And in regard to some of these recommendations, they came out because we were sort of building the bus as we were driving it. And I just wanted to give you an update on where we are on a couple of the items that were in the recommendations, and then also speak more specifically about community input to help us make final decisions about which ones are really going to be advanced and what ones we'll be looking for funding for from the variety of resources. Peg outlined some of them. That is clearly a stay tuned message from the state in terms of other resources that might be coming forward. And our goal is that we're doing this in a comprehensive and coherent way that aligns with the things that we've been working on over the last couple of years and the things that we're about to put shovel in the ground in right now, given that we're making some major public facilities investments in our downtown with the library and the new fire stations going in at either end of the Main Street. So first thing I'll tackle is Court Square. You'd all know that we're doing a pilot project. We're planning to run that through early November, wrapping it up when the farmers market season wraps up. And we'll be looking to we've already received a lot of feedback on it. We expect to receive more. And we'll take a look at that in November to make some decisions about how and if we are going to advance that to the next stage of becoming a pedestrian plaza. I will say that the pilot project that was put into place, really did the physical piece pretty quick. And in retrospect, had we thought about programming the space more robustly early on, we probably would have gotten that done, but we're looking to invite a multitude of uses, especially as the hot summer sun goes away and doesn't beat down on the space as much, that we're hoping that it'll become a much more comfortable and attractive place for people to be during the days. And also looking to partner with abutters so that they can use it for outdoor dining if that's something that we can work out. The marketing initiative that we talked about, we put QRs on all the little B structures so that now when you stand at a B structure, you can whip out your phone, take a look at the QR code that's on the base, and that will take you right to the Visit Greenfield MA website, which we've been ramping up and trying to make more robust. Clearly, the city is getting ready to update its website, and as part of that, we're looking to really lay the pieces in place that need to be there for a solid marketing plan that the mayor has had on her agenda since the beginning of her administration. The First National Bank, we all know and love this building that's hard to find a feasible reuse for, and we have asked Mass Development for assistance to do that request for proposal with a little more technical assistance, because it is a challenging building and it's a high profile location, and it does have some particular challenges, especially with the preservation restriction and what we can and can't do with that building. Fisk Avenue parking lot. You might have read in the paper that we actually got the funding to advance that, and we're working into the designs. We're hoping to put that into construction later this fall to make a strong little greenway that will lead from Main Street down to Energy Park, and to have more greenery and but maintain the number of parking spaces that are there right now. The other things with the parking benefit district, one of the first things we've started working on and preparing for thinking about that as a possibility is we're actually updating the inventory of parking spaces in the downtown. Clearly, that is a shifting target with the Hope Street lot going out of service. The fire station lot's going to go out of service soon. Clearly we've been playing with some of the spaces in the downtown in terms of making those available for outdoor dining, changing over some regular parking spaces to commercial loading and 15-minute spaces. And so what we're trying to do is just really update our inventory as the basis for where we'll be moving forward and taking a closer look at the parking study. The storefront and signage improvement, we have heard very robust and genuine concern that program doesn't work very well, especially when tenants want to access it and the building owner is the one who actually needs to apply for that program. So we're going to look at other models to see if we can make something that's more user friendly for both the tenants and for the property owners in the downtown. We did do the Wayfinding Report a couple of years ago. We did the report, we did a couple of signs, and that project then stalled. We're looking to sort of pick that up and move forward with it as we think comprehensively about wayfinding signage in our downtown area. For the streetscape improvements, we're looking for we applied for Mass Downtown Initiative grant to help us do some streetscape improvement plans to take a look at the different elements that can be included as we're talking about doing the rebuild of Main Street. And yes, Marlo, we are talking about the rebuild of Main Street. I'm not supposed to talk about it without Marlo in the room, so I'm glad he's in the room. And the last update is really on the sign bylaw, and Planning Director Eric Torog has taken that up and is meeting with the Planning Board on it in the middle of September to discuss what they might be able to do. So that's sort of the quick and dirty little updates from what Peg and Ted had presented on the recommendations. So the question is, what are the next steps, and how do we make decisions about these recommendations that are on our plate? Which are the ones that are most critical? Which are the ones that we're most invested in advancing? Which are the ones that we want to do more research and exploration of? And which are the ones that we really are ideas that just don't work and that maybe we should just park them for a bit? So the next step of this process tonight is really the presentation of the material. And I'm hoping that, like I said, that everyone can get on the website and take a look at the full report if you'd like to do that. Talk with your friends and neighbors, talk with downtown business owners. And we are gearing up to hear your comments and feedback during the month of September. In September, we'll be meeting with city council committees to talk about the different recommendations, get their input and feedback on them. We are welcoming all sorts of written communication back. We're hoping to get that back by September 17th, which is a Friday. And what we're hoping to do is pull that all together and use that in the following week as we meet with city council and have a public forum on these recommendations. And then after that community input process happens, then we'll be making decisions about how to further advance and in what order the recommendations that are coming forward. And I want to remind you, I'm going to circle around and go back to where we started, is that in January 2020, we launched this effort called the Deliberate Downtown, which was really the Downtown Revitalization Plan update. What you see here are really some short and midterm goals, but we'll be advancing the conversation about what do we want our downtown to look like in 5, 10 years from now, next 50 years, and what sort of plan do we need to put in place and agree on as a community that we want to put our shoulder behind so that we can lay the path to make this the beautiful little downtown with the great bones that it has now and the opportunities that lay in front of it. How can we capitalize on it for the community, for the businesses, and for the future of Greenfield? So with all that, we're going to now open it up and answer any sort of questions or provide any additional feedback that you, or additional information that you'd like to have on the recommendations. We're going to ask that if you have a question that you drop it into the chat box, and we will work off of that and work our way through the questions. And I'm going to start because I saw that some questions came in during the presentation. So I'm just going to go down them. And like I said, we'll answer them the best we can. And if we don't know the answer tonight, we'll certainly try to get better information for you as we have this more robust discussion about them in September. So Mary asked to learn more about the preservation restriction that's on the bank building. The First National Bank has a historic preservation restriction on it. It is pretty robust. Your question about does the building have to remain standing is one that we have also asked about. And we are hoping that as we do the RFP process with technical assistance from Mass Development, that we'll get greater clarity on that. All right. Okay, there's a question about the Norwood Shared Street Project. How has the success been gauged? I'm going to toss that over to Ted and Peg. You say it's been successful by what measures, and how might some of the elements that make it successful translate to Greenfield?
Good question. I don't know if they've done actual surveys to find out, what the community overall thinks about it. But in talking with the planning director and the town manager, the feedback they've gotten so far has been really good. I can follow up with that and find out if there's actually been any kind of measurable surveys. But it's similar in that it's a secondary street. The one concern they had about it was giving up the 20 parking spaces. That has not been an issue for them. They have a lot of things going on the adjacent common, but it's not an easy place for people to gather because it's sort of a rolling terrain. And this sort of creates sort of an extension to that open space. And in Greenfield, the formal space where the monument is, that's a sort of a similar situation. It's really not set up for gatherings. You got a lot of traffic on the other side on Bank Row. So there are some similarities. And I think that there was some concern with the Norwood Theater early on about the impact it might have, but it actually turned out that it's great because during intermissions, people pour out onto the plaza and have something to drink. So all in all, it's been positive feedback, but I can find out if there's any sort of measurable tools that they've used.
Thank you, Ted. Okay, the question is, how can Greenfield Tree Committee provide input on the tree selection for the final phase of Fisk Ave? The answer to that is that the trees that are currently there will be relocated. At the moment, there's no plan to add any additional trees to that Fisk Avenue pocket park. Okay. And Pella Windows run large trucks through their Miles Street entrance. That might limit parking. The plan with the Fisk Avenue and Miles Street pocket park is that the roadway width will not be impacted. There will be angled parking on Miles Street that will back out into Miles Street. But in talking with the engineers who were looking at the traffic there, it felt like it was pretty minor traffic along that, and that it should not in any way impact large trucks that run down to the backloading gate at the Pella building. Okay, another question about how does Northampton's Main Street width compare with Greenfield's? Does Greenfield have a similar amount of space to achieve something similar to Northampton? Ted, do you wanna?
Yeah, well, the Northampton's it's a much wider Main Street, but actually that's a concern that they have. They want to actually do a better job defining the lanes and maybe trying to narrow it with some other treatments. They've got angled parking like Greenfield does, and they're going to look at putting in a bike track either in front of the parking between the curb and the park cars, or adjacent to the travel lanes. But they're very concerned about the width of it, and they're trying to narrow it in different ways. And other than that, though, I think there are some pretty good similarities. It's basically the cross section with the sidewalks are a little bit wider over there, but they have the angled parking, at least for now. And they've got 2 lanes in each direction with a turning lane at the major intersections. So yeah, it's a little wider, but I think when they do some more traffic calming, it'll be more comparable to what we have in Greenfield.
Okay, thank you. Can you please say again what the public input timeframe and methods are going to be? Sure, and I also want to share with folks that we'll be doing a press release this week to get out the word about the public input. Our goal is the municipal staff will be meeting with the city committees in advance of city council committees in September prior to city council, and then we'll also be at the city council meeting, which is going to be on September 22nd this month, to talk about the recommendations and to share ideas and input and feedback for the city council members. The other ways that we'll be looking to get public feedback and input is, first, if anyone wants to write up any sort of comments or written feedback or suggestions, we'll accept those. Those would be emailed to me, mj.adams@greenfield-ma.gov. Again, that'll be on the website and in a press release later this week. And then Sustainable Greenfield Implementation Committee is going to host a public forum conversation on these recommendations at their meeting in September, which is on the 23rd. It's Thursday, the 23rd. So all those ways. And Judy has asked, have any recommendations been made related to Energy Park? And thank you for a great presentation. The only recommendation that's really focused on Energy Park is really looking at the Fisk Avenue Pocket Park and how that relates to the Energy Park. So nothing specific on the Energy Park. But if there's feedback that people want to give us on the Energy Park, like I said, we'll have a process and people can certainly offer additional information. I also want to share that you probably saw in the newspaper that the mayor is going to create a process so people could offer some input back on how the city should be spending its ARPA money. That's the American Rescue Plan money that's coming. Greenfield does have an allocation of slightly more than $5 million There are some limitations in how that money can be used. But the question, clearly makes sense, and you'll be seeing that from the mayor's office, some sort of opportunity to offer some feedback on your thoughts about how those funds might be allocated for the city. Fisk Avenue, has it been decided that none of the trees recommended in the Conway design will be included? We hope to have a gathering space. Yes. So the initial decision about the Fisk Avenue trees is that it was largely relative to budgetary. We did include in the budget to maintain the trees that are there, but we don't have the funding or access to the funding to do additional trees at the moment. But as I said, I'm more than happy to have a conversation with the tree committee offline about the specifics about the Fisk Avenue design. Okay, and there's a question that there were public toilets on the common in the past. They were just covered over and still exist. Can we have them resurrected as we invite more people to come into the commons? Marlo, is that the question that you were willing to take?
No, actually, it was the pocket park questions if you needed help.
All right. We are aware that there's a historic public toilets underneath the common. There has been no discussion about resurrecting them, although clearly access to public toilets is an important thing if you're trying to identify yourself as a tourist attraction and a place for people to have the access to the services that they need when they come into public spaces like that. That's a very good note that you're making to us, Bob, and we'll certainly take that into consideration. And clearly, we're hoping that with some sort of more comprehensive thinking and perhaps a more focused staffing on what the downtown needs, that we'll be able to address those questions more extensively. Okay, Judy said, I saw a few weeks ago what Burlington, Vermont did with their city park, which is similar in size, and it was inspiring. It took lots of pictures. I took lots of pictures. Judy, happy to see those if you'd like to share those with us. Okay, Mary says they have a U.S. Forest grant that will pay for trees. Okay, happy to talk with the tree committee offline about the design and the implementation of that design. So let's talk, Mary. Okay, I think we're having enough conversations about the trees on Fisk Avenue. I'm going to suggest that we have that offline. Mike Mullins.
MJ, excuse me, if you could include the tree warden, that would be great too.
Certainly.
Thank you.
Yep. I think one opportunity we're missing here, half mile downtown. That's uncomfortable. Okay. So it looks like we're starting to get some feedback and comments, and I'm happy to, what we're specifically looking for is, I apologize. It says, what might we be missing by focusing strictly on downtown and not the adjacent neighborhoods? Would this be a way of jumpstarting a return to downtown? I just want to share with you that the focus of the rapid recovery was clearly a downtown commercial district area that we needed to find for the state as we were seeking these funds. But that's a very good point that what's going on in the neighborhoods adjacent to downtown are very important to the success of downtown. Okay. Let's see. And are there any other questions? Okay. Well, seeing none, I want to thank everyone for being here this evening. I want to thank you for listening to and to be patient as we went through the presentation of this. Want to encourage people to go ahead and to read through the report, take the opportunity to let us know your thoughts on it, and we'll be looking to gather together again later in September to chew on it, think about it, and figure out how we're going to advance the things that really rise to the surface in terms of being important. And thank you, Peg, and thank you, Ted, for your hard and diligent work with us, and to all the community members who participated, both in the process that we did earlier this year and the process that we'll continue to do as we move forwards. So, thank you all.
Thanks very much.
Thanks.